activists have been trying to stop this building of a massive development, a law enforcement training center. There have been protests that have been going on, arrests taking place as well. And so now there's an effort to collect petitions, signatures to get this on the ballot. But now there's a battle between organizers of that initiative as well as the city of Atlanta. The Atlanta City Council refuses to move forward with verifying 116,000 signatures supporting this proposed referendum. Now, a new poll shows that 60% of Atlanta voters want Cop City placed on the ballot. Organizers of the Stop Cop City campaign continue to push for the referendum as Atlanta tries to decide whether or not to build this $90 million police training facility. Anoa Changa joins me now from Atlanta. Anoa is one of the folks who is involved in this effort to get this on the ballot. Anoa, welcome to the show. So I'm trying to understand, how is the city refusing to verify the signatures? Don't they have to have a verification system to make sure that eligible voters properly sign and that this is going to be a legal initiative?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thanks for having me on, Roland. So the city's rationale for refusing to verify has to do with some of the litigation that has happened around whether or not the referendum itself should be allowed to not only go forward, but also what was the exact date for when those signatures had to be turned in. In the summertime, organizers had actually, or those who had sued the city had actually gained extended amount of time to file those signatures. The city appealed to the 11th Circuit. We're just talking in your first segment about federal courts intervening. So they've actually been appealing to the 11th Circuit to not just get the time rolled back on when organizers had the time to collect signatures, but even to say that the referendum itself is just not even valid. There was a grant of additional time from the district court here in Georgia, but the 11th Circuit stayed that original order. So the city is saying that basically because of that stay, the additional time that was given to collect signatures is invalid, and therefore they're not required to actually count these signatures until the 11th Circuit says otherwise.
All right, so on the outside looking in, that's quite confusing because we've seen other ballot initiatives all around the country, and normally what happens is you get a certain period of time where you have to gather signatures, and then they go back and check to see if those people are city residents or if they are registered voters or whatever the city or the county or the state's process is. And so do you believe that this is an effort? And first of all, what is y'all's goal? When do you want this to be on the ballot?
Well, we have municipal elections happening here in Georgia and various places in the next few weeks in November. So ideally, folks would have liked to have had it on the ballot in November. It would have been, a good boon for turnout. We have some, I believe, a few school board races here in Atlanta and a couple other municipal races. But the goal is to get it on the ballot in March. We will not have a Democratic primary for president, but there will be, a primary election in March here in Georgia. And so that is the goal, I believe, is to get it on the ballot then. But to your original question or point about it seems kind of confusing from looking on the outside in, you're right. We have these ballot initiative processes that are a really great sign of the health of our democracy, that individuals in their communities can rally with their neighbors and other members in their communities to get initiatives on the ballot for voters to decide. We've seen successful ballot referendum processes in the last few years, and Amendment 4 in Florida that restored voting rights to thousands of formerly incarcerated folks. That was a ballot initiative process. We just saw last year in Kansas and Michigan expanding access to abortion rights that have been denied to people post-Dobbs. Those were ballot referendum processes. We've seen in Missouri and countless other places. Right now, Ohio has a ballot initiative process. And so this is not new in the land of America, right? But what we do see happening here is a very anti-democratic, unfortunately, unfortunately bipartisan effort from the state-controlled Republicans and unfortunately Democratic-controlled administration here in Atlanta to refuse to allow people to have access to this procedure that is used quite frequently around the country by citizens who are, duly able to do this within their rights, and for some reason they don't want Atlantans to be able to do the same thing.
Questions from the panel. Kelly, you're first.
Sure. So when it comes to those who are for it but are still understanding what the other side is thinking about regarding this issue, like what's the rationale for actually keeping Cop City around those who aren't cops? Like, have you encountered any Black people or people who would be affected by this decision who are actually for it?
I think in terms of the actual whether the referendum should be on the ballot, I mean, ultimately the issue is that there was a process that was laid out. Folks have done, I mean, we've been hearing for the past 2.5 years or so that people need to follow the process. We had folks who were at city council when this decision was first uncovered in the middle of the pandemic. There was multiple hours, like I think over 16 hours of public comment has been made on multiple different occasions. So people have been following the process about this issue and lobbying their elected officials all the way. So now we have this referendum process where 116,000 Atlantans, those who are registered voters who were registered and eligible to vote in the 2021 mayoral and city council election, 116,000 plus signed on to agree that this needs to be put on the ballot. That doesn't mean that all 116,000 agree with ultimately canceling the lease. That just means people believe that the democratic process itself needs to move forward. That is more than the 78,000 people who voted in the mayoral runoffs, in which allowed Andre Dickens, in which he got 50,000 votes to become the mayor. So the thing is, it's not so much about whether or not people agree with Cop City or want it to move forward. There are some people who agree with Cop City ultimately, but also believe that the democratic process itself needs to play out. And as someplace that's the cradle of, so many movement activities, we've also seen the resurgence of pro-democracy work in our communities happening here in Georgia over the last several years. The same arguments that we have seen Brian Kemp and other statewide Republicans making against Stacey Abrams and the efforts that she led in 2018 that elected and flipped the Senate in 2020, and that also sent Reverend Warnock back to the Senate in 2022. Those same arguments are now being used by Democratic elected officials, including our mayor, against this referendum. And ultimately, whether people agree or disagree or have different issues, like the referendum itself, follow the process and it needs to be on the ballot.
Michael.
So I had a quick question here. I know Mayor Andre Dickens is for what has been dubbed Cop City, this training center. If you could just state briefly, what are some of the reasons why the mayor is for it? And I know there's a lot of opposition to it. What are some of the reasons why others are against this training facility being built and $90 million being spent for it?
I mean, I believe, brother, you said it right there. $90 million are being put forth without a proper democratic process, right? When we talk about budgets, we talk about like spending of the people's resources, the public money that's going into this for something that's ultimately backed by a private entity, the Atlanta Police Foundation. I mean, there needs to be a higher level of scrutiny, and different people have different reasons across this movement for why they object. You have environmentalists who object to many of the issues with the fact that this is on, forest land. We're supposed to be the city under the trees, and we're decimating forest land to build this, right? You have people who are, good governance and democracy folks like myself personally, who want to see actual process follow. We have seen time and again overwhelming response from people in the city who have participated in processes. My city councilwoman, my former city councilwoman, was the one that introduced this original legislation. She lost her seat in part because people like me found out when folks were going door to door that this was even something that was happening. So the fact that we have not had good transparency and good governance in the decision-making process over the past 2.5 years is a part of why people at least want to have a referendum, to have an open public process so that we can let the people decide. We elect people to go represent us, and when they're not doing that, we have referendums. We have other ways that we can help get decisions made. Now, some people do not agree with relocating the site. They are very diehard against it, and those are conversations that we all need to have as a community moving forward. But at the very most basic level, we have aspects of democratic process that have broken down in the city of Atlanta that are not being followed, and it's Democrats, unfortunately, that are coinciding alongside Republicans to make that happen.
All right, thank you.
Matt?
I have two questions that are very quick. The first is, how do you envision the opposition and really the conversation around Cop City being a model for going forward as it relates to other potential issues? And what I'm asking specifically is, it seems like here, more so than in other instances, you have a nexus of environmental interests and governance issues and justice and militarization questions, all of which are coalescing to have opposition and in some respects, people who are proponents for it. So first, how do you see this as a model going forward in terms of how we address issues that are kind of intersectional in their nature, number one? And then number two, as it relates to the Black people who live around there, has there been conversation of like a Title VI complaint or something related to disparate impact? It's my understanding that there's supposed to potentially be an effect, a warming effect for a predominantly Black community around Cop City. Has that been discussed?
That is amazing. Your second question, as a member of the community that lives around the proposed site, no, I don't know that that is actually something that's happening. I don't think we've even had community-wide conversations for those of us in the city of Atlanta. But also to that question, there is an entire population that lives in DeKalb County, an unincorporated area, that have no say in this process at all. And so that is actually something that's a really interesting proposition that you raise. And no, I don't think that has come into any of the conversation as of yet. So the first part about how this could be a model for conversation or even just addressing opposition, I mean, a lot of these problems that we're facing nationwide or in our direct communities are multifaceted, right? They interact with things around the environment, climate change, like you said, justice issues, economics, and class analysis. But we have to have those abilities to come together and talk through these issues so that if there is something that's going before the city council, and yes, there might be a specific, justice aspect, which has drawn a lot of people to this, but being able to identify the other ways that it has impact also helps us build broader coalitions. We've seen this in electoral work more broadly when we have, different groups of people come together to support particular candidates or initiatives, right? And so I think that broader coalition mindset and being able to see how we can cut across the different work that people are doing to build, consensus around how we can move forward and bring about the change that we all deserve is important. The other thing, because I think the sister's original question about what about people who might feel that this is something that they need, or the conversations, we do need to have these conversations in our community, right? And I don't think that that requesting that the referendum itself be on the ballot is a shutdown. That's another area of conversation. That's another area of outreach that needs to happen for whoever is supporting whichever side, right? But at the very least, we need to make sure that when we do have very clear interests of communities that are in question, that we are allowed to have the forums that are available to all of us, regardless of neighborhood, socioeconomic status, and who we're donating to, that can actually be something that we access through the democratic process, as we're allegedly supposed to do as citizens in this country.
All right, Noah Changa, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. And we'll keep monitoring this story to see what happens. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.